The royal family thought they could bury this behind closed doors, but what just leaked out of Buckingham Palace has triggered an absolute firestorm that no one saw coming. Before the public even had a chance to digest the sudden shift in the royal schedule, a set of locked-door documents was already quietly moving through the halls of power, signaling a dramatic shift in how the monarchy is operating behind the scenes. King Charles has made a move so sudden, so calculated, and so deeply personal that it has sent shockwaves through the entire royal household, leaving Queen Camilla sidelined and demanding answers. We aren't just talking about a minor tweak to a calendar or a last-minute schedule adjustment. This was a cold, deliberate restructuring that was drawn up weeks before Camilla even realized her authority was being questioned. The moment she found out, the atmosphere inside the palace completely shattered. A private confrontation turned into an all-out emotional war, and the fallout is threatening to rip the royal family apart at the seams. If you thought you knew what was happening inside the royal family, think again. Hit that subscribe button right now to Crown Watch, because today we are breaking down the explosive royal decision that changes everything you thought you knew about the future of the British crown. To truly understand how this massive palace crisis exploded, we have to look back at the fragile foundation that has been building inside Buckingham Palace for months. Ever since King Charles ascended to the throne, the balance of power inside the royal household has been an extremely delicate tightrope walk. Queen Camilla spent decades navigating intense public scrutiny, brutal media headlines, and deep-seated skepticism to finally secure her place as queen consort beside Charles. For years, her position seemed unbreakable. She was Charles's primary confidant, his steadfast supporter, and the woman who stood shoulder to shoulder with him through the most turbulent times in modern royal history. But behind the scenes, a very different story was unfolding. Inside the gilded halls of power, whispers had been growing louder about the true dynamic between the king, the queen consort, and the future of the monarchy represented by Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales. For months, insider reports suggested that subtle power struggles were beginning to form over royal protocol, public visibility, and ceremonial hierarchy. While the public saw a united front during official appearances, behind closed doors, tension was simmering over who truly held the reins of influence inside the palace. Senior courtiers and household officials were reportedly caught in the middle of competing priorities. Camilla, having worked tirelessly to earn her official standing, viewed her role not just as a supportive spouse, but as a central pillar of the modern royal image. She expected her authority on major palace events, guest receptions, and official hosting duties to be absolute and unquestioned. However, Prince William and Catherine represented something equally powerful: the future continuity and long-term survival of the House of Windsor. With every public appearance, William and Catherine drew overwhelming global attention, admiration, and respect, creating a natural shift in focus that made certain members of the inner circle deeply uncomfortable. Sources close to the household reveal that behind the scenes, questions were quietly being raised about how the public perceived the hierarchy during major state gatherings. Was the focus remaining where it needed to be, or were private egos and individual standing beginning to overshadow the institution itself? The history between William, Charles, and Camilla has always been complex, built on years of delicate negotiations, emotional healing, and careful boundary setting. While a public truce had long been established, the underlying tensions never truly disappeared. They merely waited for a catalyst. And as the planning for this season's high-profile royal events got underway, that catalyst arrived. King Charles found himself standing directly between the woman he loves and the institution he swore a sacred oath to protect. Friends close to the king describe him as feeling increasingly overwhelmed by the subtle friction brewing within his own inner circle. He knew that any sign of division, any public slip-up, or any perception of an internal power struggle would be seized upon by the media and dissected worldwide. The pressure on Charles was immense, and the ticking clock of upcoming state duties meant a decision had to be made, one way or the other. As the weeks ticked down toward the palace's flagship summer gatherings, the quiet disagreements over scheduling evolved into a full-scale battle of philosophies. Camilla's supporters within the household argued that as queen consort, her name should lead every major invitation list and greeting line, reinforcing her elevated status at every possible turn. They insisted that placing anyone else, even the future king and queen, in front of her during formal lineups would send a confusing message to foreign dignitaries and the British public alike. To them, any step backward for Camilla was an insult to the king's own authority and a dangerous sign of institutional weakness. On the other hand, advisors aligned with Prince William maintained that the monarchy could not afford to look backward or cling to rigid vanity. They argued that the institution's public approval ratings were heavily driven by the younger generation of royals, and that keeping William and Catherine front and center was essential for long-term survival. The disagreement ceased to be a simple operational discussion and morphed into a fierce, ideological war fought in whispered conversations down long palace corridors. Every draft of every schedule became a battleground, with advisors constantly revising, redacting, and resubmitting protocol orders in an attempt to assert dominance. Meanwhile, King Charles was caught in the middle of a nightmare scenario. He watched as his private study became an arena for competing factions, each demanding his final sign-off. The emotional strain on the king was visible to everyone who worked closely with him. He was desperate to maintain peace in his personal life, yet acutely aware that his primary duty was to protect the crown from scandal. The lingering scars of past royal crises hung heavy in the air, serving as a constant reminder of how quickly private disputes could explode into catastrophic public headlines. What made the situation even more explosive was the growing isolation Camilla began to feel inside the palace infrastructure. She started noticing subtle changes in how information was passed to her office. Briefings arriving slightly late, meeting notes lacking key attachments, and decisions being finalized before she had a chance to offer her input. Instinctively, she knew that the ground beneath her feet was shifting, but she refused to step down or accept a secondary role without a fight. She believed she had earned her place beside the king through decades of sacrifice, and she was determined to hold her ground against what she perceived as a coordinated effort to push her into the background. By the time the fateful morning meeting was called to finalize the upcoming garden party schedules, the air inside Buckingham Palace was practically thick with tension. Every person walking into that room knew that the status quo could no longer hold. The private grievances, the secret meetings, and the months of simmering resentment were all heading toward an inevitable, high-stakes collision. The fuse had been lit, the stage was set, and all it would take was one single piece of paper to blow the entire palace wide open. The breaking point came during a private, high-stakes gathering held inside the palace breakfast room, a space usually reserved for quiet morning meetings, but on this day, it became the battlefield for a confrontation that changed everything. The meeting was originally called to finalize the guest reception order and greeting protocols for an upcoming major royal gathering. In attendance were King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William, and key senior aides. What was supposed to be a routine review of ceremonial timing quickly turned into an icy standoff. The moment Camilla looked over the official protocol sheet, her expression completely changed. Right there on paper, laid out in black and white ink, was an adjustment to the receiving line order that placed Catherine, the Princess of Wales, in a prominent forward position during key guest welcomes, a position that Camilla believed belonged exclusively to her as queen consort. The room went dead silent. Camilla didn't yell or lose her composure immediately. Instead, she questioned the adjustment with a cold, sharp precision that made everyone in the room freeze. She looked directly across the table at the aides and demanded to know who had authorized the change. Prince William spoke up calmly, explaining that the decision was about modern optics, public continuity, and projecting a clear vision of the monarchy's future to the international community. But to Camilla, those words didn't sound like strategic planning. They sounded like a direct attempt to push her into the background. The argument escalated rapidly. Camilla's voice tightened as she accused the advisors of undermining her authority and attempting to rewrite established royal protocol behind her back. Then came the moment that shattered any remaining pretense of calm. Overcome with raw emotion and feeling completely betrayed inside her own home, Camilla set her teacup down onto the saucer with such sudden, violent force that the clatter echoed across the quiet room, causing conversation to instantly die. She stood up, looked straight at King Charles, and uttered a sentence that left the room in absolute shock. "If my place beside you is open for debate, then perhaps the public should know who is really running this family." The room plunged into an unbearable silence. Charles sat frozen, looking between his wife and his son, the sheer weight of the moment crushing down upon him. He didn't raise his voice, but his face hardened into an expression of absolute exhaustion and grim resolve. He quietly brought the meeting to an end, asking everyone to leave the room immediately. Within hours of that explosive confrontation, fake leaked messages and panicked internal memos allegedly began circulating among lower-level palace staff, whispering that a catastrophic breach had occurred between the king and queen consort. The tension did not dissipate with the end of the meeting. Instead, it spread like wildfire through the private corridors of the royal residence. Staff members spoke in hushed tones, terrified that the open rift would somehow leak to the press before the day was out. Camilla retreated to her private wing, refusing calls from senior advisors and cutting off direct contact with the king's private office. She believed she was taking a stand for her dignity, convinced that Charles would realize the severity of the mistake and step in to restore her original position on the receiving line. In her mind, this was a test of loyalty. She had stood by Charles through decades of public backlash, bad press, and institutional resistance. She believed that when pressed, the king would choose his wife over the calculated advice of court strategists and the subtle push from the Prince of Wales. She waited in her sitting room, expecting an urgent knock on the door or a private message offering a compromise. But as the dust began to settle from that disastrous morning meeting, the royal household was operating on an entirely different set of rules. Later that afternoon, a senior aide delivered a sealed leather-bound folder to Camilla's private sitting room. Inside was the official, finalized document detailing her reassigned duties for the upcoming event. Duties that drastically reduced her visible ceremonial role and removed her entirely from leading the main receiving line. As Camilla turned the page, her heart sank into her stomach. Tucked behind the main schedule was a second, highly confidential document labeled Internal Contingency Arrangements. When she read the date stamp on that secondary document, the brutal reality hit her like a physical blow. The contingency plan to reduce her role hadn't been drafted in response to her anger at the morning meeting. It hadn't been created in a panic after her outburst. The document had been drawn up, reviewed, and officially stamped weeks earlier, long before the luncheon even took place. The realization was devastating. The palace inner circle had already anticipated her resistance. They had quietly discussed her potential removal, drafted the restructuring paperwork, and secured approval in total secrecy before she even knew there was a problem. She hadn't just been overruled. She had been systematically outmaneuvered by the very institution she spent decades serving. Over the next 48 hours, the news of internal palace restructuring leaked into the wider media landscape, setting off an unstoppable chain reaction across social media platforms and international news networks. While official royal spokespersons attempted to downplay the story with carefully worded statements about routine administrative updates and flexible royal scheduling, the public saw right through the diplomatic jargon. On X, formerly known as Twitter, hashtags related to the royal decision began trending globally within hours. Thousands of royal commentators, fans, and critics engaged in fierce online debates over what this decision truly meant for the future of the crown. Supposed palace insiders began posting detailed threads claiming that this was the first step in a broader, long-term strategy driven by Prince William to modernize the royal family's public image and streamline official duties around the core direct line of succession. Pop culture commentators and high-profile media personalities weighed in with brutal hot takes. Some argued that King Charles had shown extraordinary leadership by putting the stability and reputation of the crown ahead of personal feelings, proving that he possesses the iron discipline required of a reigning monarch. Others fiercely defended Camilla, labeling the move as an insensitive, public humiliation of a woman who had worked tirelessly to uphold her royal responsibilities despite decades of unfair public judgment. As news broadcasts around the world picked up the story, footage of past royal appearances was replayed alongside dramatic commentary dissecting every subtle look, every stiff body language cue, and every missed gesture between Charles and Camilla over the past several months. Television panels endlessly analyzed the optics, questioning whether this sudden shift signaled a permanent rift within the royal marriage or a calculated political maneuver designed to protect the monarchy from internal power struggles. Inside the palace walls, the atmosphere became suffocatingly tense. Staff members were strictly instructed not to comment on internal protocol changes, but the silence only fueled the wild speculation consuming the public narrative. Every headline, every viral TikTok video, and every front-page newspaper layout amplified the drama, turning a private palace decision into an inescapable global spectacle. The digital firestorm reached a fever pitch when leaked email threads allegedly sent between high-level palace public relations managers found their way onto anonymous online forums. These leaked exchanges revealed that palace officials were actively monitoring social media sentiment in real time, tracking which royal figures garnered the highest positive engagement. The data was damning. Public interest in William and Catherine was outperforming the king and queen consort by unprecedented margins, providing the exact numerical justification court strategists needed to execute the restructuring. When Camilla learned that her public standing had been reduced to cold spreadsheets and social media metrics, her anger morphed into absolute defiance. She realized that this was no longer just about a single garden party or a seat at a receiving line. It was an existential battle for her legacy and her dignity within the House of Windsor. She summoned her most trusted private advisors for an emergency, off-the-book session, determined to craft a public response that would force the palace to reconsider its harsh stance. However, just as Camilla prepared to launch her counteroffensive, the situation escalated into territory no one inside the palace had anticipated. A secondary leak dropped like a megaton bomb across major entertainment news outlets, completely shifting the narrative and sending shockwaves through the entire royal establishment. It was revealed that the initiative to reduce Camilla's public footprint had not originated solely from internal palace aides or Prince William's strategy team. Instead, the paper trail led directly back to a private, highly confidential summit held at Sandringham weeks prior, a meeting attended exclusively by King Charles and his top legal advisors. The shocking reveal exposed that Charles himself had personally commissioned a secret audit of all royal duties, titles, and public funding allocation. The audit specifically evaluated the long-term viability of Queen Camilla's patronages and her ceremonial role in the event of major constitutional transitions. This meant the painful truth was far worse than Camilla had imagined. It wasn't just courtiers pushing her aside, nor was it simply Prince William orchestrating a power move. King Charles had actively initiated the process that put her authority on the chopping block. He had quietly given his explicit consent to explore options that would systematically minimize her presence if public sentiment or institutional stability demanded it. When this reality set in, the fragile emotional peace inside the palace shattered completely. Camilla was left reeling from what she viewed as the ultimate personal and marital betrayal, while the world watched in stunned disbelief, waiting to see how the queen consort would react to the revelation that her biggest opponent might actually be the king himself. As news of the secret audit and structural restructuring broke, public and industry reactions erupted into an all-out global media spectacle. Major news networks, talk show hosts, and digital media outlets immediately mobilized dedicated coverage teams to dissect what commentators quickly dubbed the most explosive palace realignment in modern history. The global audience divided almost instantaneously, creating a fierce cultural rift between those who supported the king's hardline institutional strategy and those who condemned the move as an unnecessary humiliation of the queen consort. Across social media platforms, digital engagement metrics shattered previous royal news records. On TikTok and YouTube, deep-dive video essays analyzing body language from recent public appearances gained millions of views within hours. Online forums were overwhelmed with passionate debates, with fans creating dedicated fan edits, timeline breakdowns, and speculation threads. The hashtag trends turned into virtual battlegrounds where supporters of Prince William and Catherine clashed directly with defenders of Queen Camilla, turning the family's internal affairs into a worldwide public debate. In the mainstream media, prominent royal biographers and veteran commentators offered sharply conflicting perspectives. On daytime television panels, media insiders debated whether King Charles had acted out of visionary strength or cold betrayal. Supporters praised the monarch for demonstrating the iron discipline required to protect the crown's future, arguing that a modernizing institution must prioritize public connection and long-term stability over personal domestic comfort. They insisted that streamlining the core group around the direct line of succession was an inevitable and necessary step for the survival of the monarchy in a rapidly changing world. Conversely, critics and defenders of Queen Camilla launched a scathing counter-narrative. They highlighted the decades of service, dedication, and public scrutiny Camilla had endured to secure her official standing, framing her sudden marginalization as an ungrateful and callous institutional maneuver. Several high-profile commentators openly questioned the palace's ethics, accusing senior advisors of sacrificing the queen consort's dignity to manipulate public approval ratings and score easy PR victories with younger demographics. The corporate and entertainment industries quickly capitalized on the surrounding fervor. Major streaming platforms and documentary producers reportedly rushed new projects into development, eager to produce dramatic reenactments and investigative specials centered on the behind-the-scenes power struggle. Book publishers began courting former palace staff and insider sources, offering lucrative deals for tell-all memoirs that promised to expose the secret dynamics operating within the House of Windsor. International reactions were equally intense. Media outlets across North America, Europe, and the Commonwealth led their evening broadcasts with updates on the palace crisis. Commonwealth commentators questioned how an internal power struggle of this magnitude would impact the monarchy's global standing and diplomatic influence, raising concerns about the institution's ability to project unity during upcoming international tours and state visits. Behind closed doors, high-net-worth donors, charity leaders, and institutional patrons expressed deep anxiety over the ongoing controversy. The uncertainty surrounding royal patronages and ceremonial representation threatened to disrupt major philanthropic initiatives, leaving organizational leaders scrambling to determine which royal figures would ultimately represent their causes moving forward. The fallout was no longer contained within the palace walls. It was actively impacting the broader ecosystem of public and charitable operations reliant on royal endorsement. As the debate continued to rage worldwide, the palace found itself entirely unable to regain control of the public narrative. Every official attempt to project calm was met with fierce public skepticism, and every minor detail leaked from insider sources only added more fuel to the global media firestorm. The public and industry responses made one thing abundantly clear. The world was no longer just watching the royal family. It was actively taking sides, and the resulting division threatened to permanently reshape how the public perceives the House of Windsor forever. Just when it seemed like the controversy had reached its absolute peak, an unbelievable new detail emerged from deep within the palace's administrative corridors, a revelation so shocking that it completely reframes the entire narrative. A high-ranking palace source, speaking under absolute anonymity, revealed that the decision to alter Camilla's role was not solely driven by royal protocol or internal family dynamics. Tucked away inside the confidential archives of the royal household is a recently discovered personal letter written by King Charles himself, dated just days before the official decision was finalized. In this private letter, addressed to his most trusted legal advisor, the king didn't just discuss ceremonial party hosting duties or receiving lines. He explicitly outlined a comprehensive, multi-phase plan for a structural reorganization of royal responsibilities, signaling a deliberate shift in how senior titles, official patronages, and public representation will be managed moving forward. Even more astonishing, the letter makes direct reference to a long-held, secret agreement regarding the future administrative structure of the royal household. An agreement that Camilla was reportedly never made aware of during her years of marriage to Charles. This means that the reduction of her role at the garden party wasn't an isolated incident or a temporary measure to calm a single family argument. It was merely phase one of a much larger, sweeping palace master plan that is already in motion. When rumors of this private letter began circulating among top-level courtiers, the tension inside Buckingham Palace reached a breaking point. Sources claimed that Camilla confronted Charles once again, demanding to know the full truth about what else had been decided behind her back. But instead of providing easy reassurances, the king reportedly remained silent, leaving the queen consort facing an agonizing uncertainty about what phase 2 of this master plan will actually entail. Is King Charles preparing to unveil even more drastic changes to the royal structure in the coming months? Will Queen Camilla accept this reduced public role? Or is she preparing a dramatic countermove behind the scenes that could expose even deeper palace secrets to the world? The answers to these questions remain locked behind the heavy wooden doors of Buckingham Palace. But one thing is an absolute certainty. The drama inside the House of Windsor is far from over, and the next chapter could change the British monarchy forever. What do you think about King Charles's explosive decision? Did he make the right choice by prioritizing the institution and its future continuity? Or was Queen Camilla treated unfairly after decades of loyal service? We want to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment down below right now, and let your voice be heard in this heated debate. If you loved this deep dive into the hidden world of royal drama, make sure to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a single update from Crown Watch. We are tracking every single movement, leak, and announcement coming out of Buckingham Palace, and trust us, you will not want to miss our next video, where we reveal the shocking truth about what's hidden inside phase 2 of the King's master plan. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next explosive episode.